I mentioned the AB 811 program. They've got Solar Sonoma that is set, a formal program that's based on Sonoma, Solar Sebastopol. Now it's Solar Sonoma County. They've set a target for solar installation for the next, by 2011 to have 25 megawatts installed. So they've set up a one-stop. You know, they've done a whole bunch of things in Sonoma to push solar ahead. Their water agency, I think, is one of the most curious and interesting things. The Sonoma County Water Agency is really taking a major role in the climate work there. Now, it makes sense in terms of their own agency. They've got a carbon-free by 2015 goal for the water agency, which I think would be interesting for other water agencies to look at.
And they only import water. They have to use.
Yeah, they're all Russian River and
groundwater.
Yeah. So they're looking at their own. They're the biggest energy user in the county, and so they're looking at their own energy use, but they're also funding a number of these other projects that are going on in the region. They sent 3 folks to the climate negotiations in Poland in December. You know, to be part of a local government session that was talking to the national and international reps about the importance of local action. So, you know, their water agency has really stepped up, and the head of their water agency is speaking on these issues, both here and actually now around the country, and their funding efforts. So you come up with ideas in Sonoma, and there's a funding source that's available that's not available in some other places right now, which is interesting. They are doing they've got a number of proposals into the CEC on rebates, on a big retrofit program that they're designing for commercial and residential. They're doing a water concert. They've got a proposal in for pay-as-you-saves. It's going to be a water conservation, kind of on-bill financing for water conservation. They're doing a whole set of things that are interesting. So these are the kinds of things that we want to uncover and see if maybe you guys are already working on something like it, or you've had an idea, but it would be good to, if they've done the homework, to go and look at what they're doing.
And then so after you've sort of got a scope for that, then what's the next?
The next, we're going to do the scans, and then we're going to link people together to look at that stuff. Okay, so, you know, electronically and in person, we're going to figure out a way that we can easily you know, trade that information and trade who's working on it. We don't want to get bogged down in a huge, cumbersome kind of setup here, but some pretty lean and mean approach to trading that information and getting it back and forth. Yeah.
Sorry about the second question, but you referred to this scientific study, so I was wondering a little bit, you know, about the time frame for that, and with the notion that I mean, that would probably indicate already a lot of required adaptation measures,
Yeah.
which would probably be quite costly. And you know, in terms of trying to build, you know, political constituency, or whatever we want to call it, I mean, largely it has to do with choices that people have. You know, I mean, you either pay to reduce carbon, you know, or organize yourself to reduce carbon emissions, or, you know, you organize yourself to move thousands of people or build thousands of miles of dikes or whatever. I mean, so it seems that study might be, you know, sort of important in trying to lay out, you know, to be able to lay this out as, you know, these are the choices. There's only there's sort of two choices, not that they're mutually exclusive, but, you know, you either do this or you either do that, but ignoring is not something that's feasible, or something like that.
Yeah, no,
so,
and that's
so this so I'm just trying to get a sense of what's the framework for the scientific study, and some of the projections around adaptation needs and so on and so forth that could maybe help politically drive things.
Yeah. We've laid out a 5-point kind of plan on this, and the scientific study is point 1. So the first is, and the time frame on it is 12 months, basically. The scientific study will be done by next fall. And that will lay out impacts on the Bay Area, vulnerabilities in the Bay Area, key vulnerabilities, and outline potential strategies. But it's not a plan for dealing with all of it, because those are going to be a lot of political questions. So this is going to be the foundation document. The second, we're going to use this document to get, we think, a campaign going about why we need to do more adaptation planning. You know, no matter what we do, as you all know, there are going to be impacts. There are impacts already, and they're going to get greater, no matter what we do. So it has to be a two-track process that we're mitigating, and hopefully at a much accelerated rate. At the same time, we're making our cities and our populations more resilient for the impacts that are going to happen no matter what we do in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. So we think we need to get a campaign going with that foundation document as to why we need to do more adaptation planning and thinking about resilient communities in all sorts of ways. Public health, infrastructure, all of it, development. And then, once we've built that interest in the subject more, then do a regional plan on adaptation. There are already groups working at some cities are looking at this. Marin has looked at this quite a bit, or a fair amount. San Francisco is looking at quite a bit in terms of, San Francisco particularly in terms of water supply, for the city. So there are some, again, pieces of this going on in the region, and we're hoping to help knit that together.
Let's do 5 more minutes.
Okay.
You had mentioned that the Climate Bay Area has as its goal to operate within the framework of meeting or exceeding AB 32's goal, which my understanding is getting back to 1990 levels by 2020, which is woefully inadequate, according to even what the IPCC is saying is necessary, of at least 25 to 40% below 1990 levels by 2020. What could be done within this framework to emphasize the exceed part of that equation?
Well, that's where the scenario planning, I think, is going to be helpful. What we have to work with, what my agencies have to work with right now is the state law. And the state law said it is, just as you said, 2020 back to 1990. We wrote in the plan, meet or exceed, because there's general agreement that we need to do more. But there's not any agreement, this goes back to one of the first things I said here tonight, as to how much more that is. And you could go to a dozen elected officials or a dozen cities or a dozen different even advocacy groups right now. And I would argue you will not get even anything close to agreement on what that more means. So I think what we could contribute to that is some scenario planning of looking at different goals and looking at different strategies to get to those different goals in different time frames, and just start that educational process. So I think it's going to be iterative. Again, we're working with the state law that we have to work with.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that the T2035 plan does nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. Steve Heminger has said as much. All the reductions that they claim in the plan are going to come from the CAFE standards, basically, and from the low carbon fuel standards. I mean, I heard him speak a few weeks ago, and he's very gloomy about it, but he says that's the reality, because of the political will, basically. And but I think people should be aware of that this plan is doing nothing in terms of what this agency could be doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And again, it goes back to the political problem of local elected officials. They want to build, a highway project. They want to, and no one's willing to stand up and say, if you build this project, it's going to have these consequences. And of course, I don't know if the executive director is in a position to stand up and say that to the board or the commission. So,
yeah, well, I think you're misquoting Steve.
I heard him say this at Redwood City. No, so anyhow,
the plan has a number of things in it that are going to improve greenhouse gas emissions in the region. And the next plan will also do that. And our discussions and our arguments will be over how far